Guys, this is Daniel chapter 2, and in this chapter we're going to see that second part of the first angel's message. We're going to see the hour of his judgment has come in this entire chapter. Because remember in chapter 1 of Daniel that Babylon, they wanted to take Daniel and the Hebrews, the three Hebrews, and teach them the Babylonian language and give them a re-education, change their diet and all that stuff, so that after 3 years they could stand in front of the king. Well, why would they stand in front of the king? To receive judgment from the king. The king would be able to tell if they'd be able to stay in the kingdom. You know what I mean? So that's incredible. So we're seeing that the hour of their judgment. Okay, the hour of his judgment has come. Now let's look at chapter 2 here and see what we're just going to kind of skim through it. It starts out, Nebuchadnezzar is sleeping on his bed, and at nighttime he's given this dream where his spirit was troubled, his mind was troubled, and his sleep break from him. So he couldn't even sleep. This dream was so incredible. Okay, the king commanded to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. So all his people, all his government, his officials, what Babylon, their form of their science teachers and their church leaders, you know what I mean, and their pharmacists and just all the people of the kingdom, to show the king his dreams. So they all came and stood before the king. They all gathered together and stood before the king. Because we know the wicked are going to be destroyed, okay? Now check this out. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Now when we're dealing with dreams and visions, I always think prophecy. You know what I mean? So as we think about this, then it says, Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. That must be the language that they spake in Syriac. I'm not sure. He says, Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show you the interpretation. But notice what happened. Okay, the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, The thing is gone from me. He couldn't remember. And he said, If you will not make known to me the dream with the interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. So you're going to be destroyed in judgment, right? If you can't tell me what the dream was and tell me the interpretation. And this is incredible, guys, because think about prophecy, okay? That makes me think, too. Look at Revelation 19:10. There's a verse that made me think of. Revelation 19:10, John says, And I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said to me, See thou do it not, for I am thy fellow servant. This is the angel. And of thy brethren. The angel's like, I'm your brother, John. That have the testimony of Jesus. And he says, worship God. Notice what he says. He says, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Now think about what that's saying. The testimony of Jesus. If somebody's claiming that they have Christ in them, then they're going to have this testimony, which is the spirit of prophecy, the mind of prophecy. They can go into the Bible and they've been taught the correct interpretation of the prophecies, especially of Daniel and Revelation. That's something that, and I never seen that in the judgment before, that we would have to know that. But that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? That God, his true people, they have the mind of prophecy. I mean, they can open up the Bible and they can take people through the correct interpretation of the prophecies. They understand that it's not the false doctrine of futurism or preterism or the Maccabees or the Nicene Creed or just all the foolishness that came into the churches. Okay, they know the correct historicism that the prophecies are laid out throughout the continuation and flow of history. There's no breaks or gaps. It's incredible, and we're going to see that here in chapter 2. Daniel's going to show that. So I just thought that was kind of cool that part of the judgment, we're seeing this message that God's people, Daniel, we're going to see, hey, he has the spirit of prophecy. He's able to tell the king his dream and to interpret it, what it truly means. So, anyways, I thought that was really cool. But then Nebuchadnezzar says, "But if you show the dream and the interpretation, you shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and the interpretation." Now, that's something that God's people can do, and we're going to receive our reward at the second coming when Christ gets here. His reward is with him, right? We're going to get the crown of life, and we're going to get all the gifts and honor. They answered and said, "Let the king tell his servants the dream." They're like, they keep telling them, they're like, "Look, you got to at least tell us the dream, and then we can make up the interpretation," because that's what Babylon does. They just make up just make up theories, about what it might be, what it could be, instead of following what the words of the prophecy. The king answered and said, "I know of certainty that you would gain the time, because you see the thing is gone from me." So he knows what they're up to. Okay. "But if you will not make known the dream, there is but one decree for you." There's one law. Okay. "For you have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me." See, God knows this, that the wicked, the false prophets, the ones claim to be God's people but are not. They're preparing lying and corrupt words because they reject God's truth. For whatever reason, they just won't accept it. They have to pick their own version of what the interpretations are of the prophecy. But we know 1 Peter 1:20, I think it's 1 Peter 1:20, that the prophecy of the scripture is of no private interpretation. Okay, Christ, the Father, reveals it all to Christ, and then Christ reveals it to us through the angels, and then we have the mind of prophecy because we have the mind of Christ. It's amazing how it all fits together the more you really think about these things. Okay, so verse 10, so they're all going to be destroyed. The Chaldeans answered, now check this out, verse 10, before the king, and said, "There is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter." They're like, there's no man on earth that can do this, right? But they're wrong, because they didn't know God's people. "Therefore, there is no king, lord, nor ruler that has ever asked such things of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean." They're like, no, such things have never even been asked. They're trying to save their own life. "And it is a rare thing that the king requires, and there is none other that can show it before the king." Oh, but they're wrong. "Except the gods." See, because they worshipped gods. They didn't know the one true God. Okay, this was a false religion, the gods of Babylon. Today, that would be the gods of Babylon: God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost. That pagan false trinity that's geared around image worship, the sun worship. Ezekiel 8:16. That's the worst abomination that Israel does. This is why we have sun worship. Okay, so that is interesting. "For this cause the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon." See, the wise men. We know the true wise virgins, they're wise because they have the wisdom of God. Has been placed inside of them from the only wise God, the Father. Okay, so that's good. So the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. So they were all going to be killed, okay? "Now Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch." Arioch was the captain of the king's guard, okay? Which was just be like a corporal, like the head. which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. So he's already moving on, killing them all. He's getting them all gathered up, going to kill them. And notice this 15 says, he answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? Daniel said. Then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king. Okay, Daniel goes in, and he said that he would give him time, and that he would show the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went into his house and made the thing known to the three Hebrews, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. Notice how there's three. I wonder, it's just a small remnant. And that three's got to mean something there too. I had thought about that before. But anyways, that they would desire, now notice this, they desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret. Because remember, that God, he reveals secrets. Okay? That Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. See, he gave Daniel the vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the times and the seasons. He removes kings and he sets up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. It's incredible. They're filled with his Son, the Spirit of his Son. He reveals the deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. That's incredible. I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who has given me wisdom and might, and has made known unto me now what we desired of thee. See, they asked God, and he made it known to them. For thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. It's amazing. So then Daniel went in unto Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went in and said thus unto him, destroy not the wise men of Babylon. He wants to, he wants everybody to be saved. You know what I mean? He doesn't want anybody to be destroyed. Bring me in before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation. Now remember this, you guys, the hour of his judgment is coming. He's in it, you know what I mean? And what does he do while he's in this hour of judgment? He makes known the prophecy, the dream, and he gives the interpretation. I never saw that before like that. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king and said unto him, now notice what he says to the king, I have found a man of the captives of Judah that will make known to the king the interpretation. It's all about the correct interpretation. The interpretation of the prophecies in the Bible and the scriptures. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, art thou able to make known to me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? The king's like, are you serious? Like, you're the only one? No one else claims they can do it. Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king has demanded, cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers, show unto the king. He's like, none of them can do it. But, notice this, there is a God in heaven. There's not gods in heaven. Okay, there's one God in heaven, the Father, okay, that reveals secrets and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar, notice this, what shall be in the latter days. He's letting him know what's going to happen in the future. Thy dream and the visions of thy head, and his spirit upon thy bed are these. The king's got to be on the edge of his seat at this point. He's like, he's like, whoa, man, this guy's going to tell me. All right, verse 29, and we're almost done. I know that was a long intro, but we're going to go through the vision pretty quick. Part of it, I mean, other chapters bring out more of it. But he says, as for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind, his spirit, upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter. And he that reveals secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. Very important. It's prophecy. It's world history going to take place in the future. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living. And Daniel's telling him it's not because I'm special, not because I'm smarter than anybody else. It's because God revealed it to him. But for their sakes, it's for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. Amazing. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. So it's this great image that was very bright. The image's head, so we're going to see that it's actually the image of a man. Okay, the image's head, remember the image we're dealing with well, we'll get to that later, but the image's head was of fine gold. So the man's head was of pure gold. Okay, we know this represents the kingdom of Babylon. Okay, but what comes next? His breast and his arms of silver. So his breast and his arms, two arms. Okay, the Medes and the Persians, the Medo-Persian kingdom, is the silver, is the kingdom that would eventually would conquer Babylon. And these are being laid out, you guys, in historicism, meaning that the prophecy is given, and then from that time, throughout history, it takes place, throughout the flow of history. It doesn't happen 10 years here, then there's a gap for 300 years, and then something happens, and then 2,000 years go by, and then the last 7 years fulfill. No, it's all through history. Okay, no gaps. Because Babylon's in the business of changing the prophecies. But Daniel comes along and shows that it's historical. It's historicism is the correct way to do it. That's what God revealed to him. Okay. His belly and his thighs of brass. Okay, this would be the third, and it's the belly and the thighs. This brass, this is the kingdom of Greece. And we'll get into all that later in different chapters. We'll compare it. Now, this fourth kingdom right here, it's legs of iron. Now, most people know the legs of iron. This represents the iron monarchy of Rome. Okay, the pagan Roman Empire. So those are four kingdoms. Now, notice the feet. His feet, part of iron and part of clay. So it's a mixture of these two. The iron, we know, is Rome. So it's a mixture of Rome, and the clay represents the church, God's church, okay? Israel. He is the potter, we are the clay. So that's the church. So you have Rome, the Roman church. Now, after the Roman Empire fell apart, do we see a Roman church come on the scene? We see a Roman Catholic church right on time come next in history. Okay, this was written down 1,000 years before any of that stuff happened. And God was telling them that after Rome, that it would transition into a Roman church. Isn't that incredible? That will blow your mind. 1,000 years before it happened, you guys. Daniel knew this because God showed it to him. Absolutely incredible. So the feet of iron and clay represent the Roman Catholic Church. And some other stuff too. The USA's in there, and the 10 horns, the United Nations. But we'll get into that. Okay, now the last part. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. So this great image was struck at the feet. Okay, during the time of the Roman Church, we'll find out the image of the beast, the false prophet, and then the 10 horns, the United Nations. During that time is when the stone that was cut out of the mountain, okay, the stone, that rock is Christ, the Son of God, the stone that the builders rejected, okay? It came out of the mountain, because we know the Son of God came out of God. He was brought forth and born in heaven, okay, before creation. He was made of the same substance as the mountain. He was just smaller, okay? He was just as divine as his Father. But he did come forth and was born out of God. It's incredible. And it's going to smite the image at its feet. That's, the second coming, and ultimately the third coming eventually too. But we're going to see here. Then was the iron and the clay, the brass, silver, the gold, broken to pieces together and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. It's all going to blow away. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And that stone, okay, the Son of God, Jesus Christ, that smote the image, it became a great mountain, a great kingdom, okay, and filled the whole earth. Okay, after that, there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, and the everlasting kingdom is soon going to be set up. It's going to fill the whole earth, you guys. It'll last forever. It'll never be conquered, and it will never fall apart. I want to be in that kingdom so bad. Okay, and then this is the dream. So he just told them what the things were, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Okay, so now he's going to tell the interpretation. Now check this out. This is important here. Thou, O king, art a king of kings. He's talking to Nebuchadnezzar. For the God of heaven has given thee a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. It was all God gives. All He gives it all. Okay. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowl of the heaven has he given into your hand. Babylon was a majestic kingdom, you guys. It stretched across the whole earth. It was made known everywhere. And has made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. So Nebuchadnezzar in the kingdom of Babylon was the head of gold. Okay? And after thee shall arise another kingdom. Okay? Inferior to thee. So in the future, a kingdom's going to come. It's going to be inferior to you. Okay? And then a third kingdom's going to come, and it's going to bear rule over all the earth. Well, that second kingdom, you guys, that silver kingdom, the arms of silver, that's the Medes and the Persians. They're the ones that conquered Babylon and overthrew them. And then, after the Medes and Persians reigned for a time, Greece came and overtook them in war and battle. And then Greece had possession of Babylon. Okay? So those are the first three kingdoms. And the fourth kingdom, now this is the different than all the others. This is the Rome. And the fourth kingdom, this is the dragon, shall be strong as iron, the iron monarchy of state authority, pagan. For as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron that breaks all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. Very important there, you guys. It said it's going to break in pieces and bruise. Now you go back to Genesis 3:15, and you find out that it's the woman, which is Christ, is gonna he's gonna crush Satan's head, but Satan is gonna bruise Christ's heel. Okay? Well, it was the Roman Empire that killed the Son of God. The dragon, the Roman Empire, is the one that bruised Christ. But we know that Sunday morning he resurrected from the grave. He defeated death. So isn't that awesome? I never saw that until a couple months ago. That bruised. That's the Roman Empire. And where thou saw the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay, because he's the potter, we're the clay. That's Israel, the church. And part of iron, he's the Roman church. Also, iron and clay, in a sense, you could see that it's a mixture of church and state. Also, because it's been a mixture of church and state ever since the papacy took over in 508. The USA separated church and state, but it was a kingdom of iron and clay. You see, of the state and the church. And it's always been separate, but now the U.S. here in 2021, we're seeing that it's joining together. It's no longer separate. So amazing stuff, you guys. And part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much thou sawest the iron mixed with the miry clay. The state, the Roman state, mixed with the church. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay. Interesting is mentioning the toes, because check this out. The toes are part iron and part clay. So the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. Okay, the toes, there's 10 toes, right? This has got to be the final 10 horns. It's got to be the 10 horns, which we know it's their church and state. The United Nations has always been with the papacy. In 2015, they raised the Vatican flag. So their state authority mixed with church, and the church we know takes over the state authority. The state, the kingdoms give their power to the Pope, to the church. That's what happened during the Dark Ages. For 1260 years, the papacy was in control. A woman was riding the beast. Okay, and whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. Okay, the iron mixed with clay, they shall mingle themselves. That makes you think of marriage with the seed of men. Okay, that makes me think of big time marriage. But they shall not cleave one to another. Genesis, when a man leaves his mother and father to cleave unto his wife, that's church and state. The union of church and state. That's what I'm seeing there big time. Okay, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. It just doesn't stick. They try it, it just doesn't work. That's why the deadly wound in 1798, France came and ripped the Pope off his throne, and they took away the state authority and said the church is not going to rule any longer on civil matters. But it does come back, because that wound is healed. And civil authority, the government, is given back to the papacy. And it's going to happen very soon. It's actually happening right now. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms. God is a consuming fire. Hebrews 12:29. In the lake of fire, which is the second death, all the wicked are going to be consumed, and they're all going to die and be dead. And then God's people will live in the kingdom for all eternity. Amazing, man. Whew. And it shall stand forever. Incredible, you guys. For as much as thou sawest that the stone, that's the Son of God, was cut out of the mountain, that's the Son of God being brought forth from the Father, without hands, it was a miracle. A virgin was with child, in pain to be delivered, and brought forth a son in heaven. Incredible. And then that same thing happened on the earth to symbolize it. Break in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, the gold. The great God has made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. A sure word of prophecy. Wow. Then Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel. I mean, he wasn't supposed to do that, but he didn't know everything. He still had false gods, and worshipped Daniel and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors to him. Incredible, you guys. Then the king answered to Daniel and said, "Oh, of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets. Seeing thou couldst reveal this secret." Wow, it's incredible. So in the judgment, you guys, Daniel was given the vision. He prayed, and it was revealed to him in his mind, and then he was given the interpretation, and he gave the proper interpretation to the king of the prophecies. Incredible, isn't it? Of the image of the world kingdom's history. Oh, it's incredible. So anyways, there's so much more, but we'll get into these kingdoms. Will continue in Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 8, and more in Daniel. And then once we get to Revelation 12, Revelation 13, these kingdoms pick back up, and it finishes. Then Revelation 17 and 18, we see the deadly wound being healed. It's incredible. So we will cover all this later. We just wanted to do a quick review of Daniel chapter 2 and show that in the hour of his judgment, Daniel was able to prophesy and give the correct interpretation to the king, to the civil government, because the civil government's got to hear the truth, because everybody's got to make up their mind. They got to settle their mind what they will believe. They're either going to believe it or they're not going to believe it. So, all right, well, amen, you guys, and I will see you in the next one. All right.